Hey, welcome to the Cam Otis show. This week we decided, or this episode, it is a week, but this episode, we decided we just do a follow on to a show we did, I don't know, a few weeks ago, month or two ago about the Great Resignation. And, what I was thinking about in that sense was, well, how do you hire and how do you find the right people? I had a great conversation. Actually, my veteran mastermind that I run, we had a great conversation about this last night. In that, as your business grows, how do you hire the right people, and what's the process when you're a startup? You don't have a process, right? You've never hired anybody. You've outsourced. You've gotten interns, and now the big thing, as one of the other mastermind members, she always says is, I don't like people, so I'm not going to grow my business. So that only works for certain people, right? That only works for certain people. And in this case with this other business, it's on the cusp of holy crap, look out, right? And I don't want to tip his hand on anything, but yeah, it's a cutting edge technology that people are already buying into, and now he's got to go, okay, I'm going to have to hire some real people, not just outsource coding. I've got to put people in, as he put it, soft skills positions, which I love. That goes back to the old days. But really, it comes down to how do you compete with the bigs? Because as a small business and a business that has gone from the startup, the me and outsource people, to now we got to start bringing in employees. You can't compete salary. There's no way. You flat out can't compete salary. You can play a little bit with the equity game and some vesting, but I think it really comes down to what is the culture of the organization. And actually, one of the members, that was one of the things that he said is, man, you've got to sell your culture. You've got to get your values, your mission, your vision out there and sell that, because that's what's going to pull in the top talent. It's not I'll give you 10% more than Google's offering, or you get more time off, or all those sort of things, which, oh, by the way, if that's your incentive, you might as well put in a plan to replace that person, within 180 days or a year, because if that's the only reason they're coming to your team is the benefits package, there's a good probability they're going to jump to some other team as soon as they get a little bit more offered out to them. So throw it over to you, because you're in that demographic. All your mates are in that category, right? I mean, they are jumping into those jobs.
Yeah, and as we talk, one of the things that I think we enjoy about the podcast, and what a lot of our guests and listeners enjoy, is the generational difference. And this is definitely one of those categories where myself and a lot of my friends and colleagues, I can really see it from a little bit of a different perspective. But I think when you talk about hiring from like a business standpoint, I think the interesting thing is people think about like salary as the competitive factor. That it's, which one are you paying more? Like you said, the bigs are always going to pay more. That's something you can't win that race, right? But it's a little bit of a shifting of the mentality from, I'm laughing at myself, basically of old school economics to modern. And it's not just money, it's utility. It's what else are you giving them? And you touched on benefits, time off, all these different things. But the big piece of like that worker's utility that you're probably missing on is culture. And it is so important to have a culture that people buy into, because these things, the salary, the benefits, those things don't matter near as much in that situation. There's a study I read a long time ago, and I hope I still have this stat right, but it was that companies that had basically like a mission, like in sense of like giving back, that type of thing, they basically were valued at 20% higher than their wage. So you were getting a 20% raise or 20% drop more so, but because you were working towards something, a mission that you believed in, you are happier there and you still take that job. And I think that's a really interesting thing because it paints out exactly what you're talking about with culture. If people feel connected and if people feel like they're having an impact, then I'm not going to say money doesn't matter, but it sure as hell matters a heck of a lot less. And I think the interesting thing, as I was preparing for the episode, looking back on Great Resignation stuff, the fun thing as we move on from things with the pandemic and with the Great Resignation is I get more and more papers I can read from economists about trying to analyze the things that we were all speculating about. And one of the really interesting ones I was reading was talking about comparing the US's response to the pandemic to a bunch of other countries and how what we did in a few different areas might be setting us up for the Great Resignation and this labor shortage, whatever you want to call it right now. And one of the really interesting factors there is that, like with a lot of things, there's a lot of solutions. There's a lot of different ways that you can reach the same goal at the end of it. You could come out of something as crazy as the pandemic with still a strong economy. And one of the ways, and the way that the US chose, was to basically subsidize your work by, through the government programs that were paying people who didn't have jobs, who were laid off, all these different things. Blanking on the acronym, but the paycheck program that they were working with businesses, PPE, no, PPP, yeah, whatever. PPP, there we go. With all of those, we set it up to cushion people, but the US cushioned people that didn't have the job. So then now that we're trying to bounce back, there's not a clear path forward. And the alternative they drew, and I think it was Germany, if I remember right, was they basically had a very, very similar subsidy program where they were, giving out a lot of money to citizens and taking care of people in that same way. But their job system, they basically have a higher level of job attachment is the way I'd like to put it more simply, that most people in their economy are like, dude, if I lose this job, I'm done. I never want to lose this job. And so as soon as they had the option to come back to work, they were there right away because they didn't want to lose that position to the long line of people that wanted that awesome job. And so that high level of job attachment makes up for the alternatives that were being supplied. And the reason I give that background is because when you're talking about hiring, and also if you flip your perspective and you talk about looking for jobs, it's all just incentives. And you as a business owner have to focus on what you're able to control in that. And the biggest incentive that you can control is culture, just like you said.
Yeah, well, and speaking of culture, you touched on something that with Germany that I believe is part of their country's culture, is their jobs are very much their identity. The way that their education,
urban engineering.
Yeah, their education system works. They have the split in the at the high school level, which is really at about 16 years old for them, where you're going white collar or you're going blue collar is basically what it splits them into.
Mm-hmm.
And
those since you went into that more, because that's kind of what I glossed over with the job attachment. It's basically that white collar group that went immediately back because there's such a long line for those positions because they're so sought after.
Well, I wouldn't say it. Maybe the data supports that, but my personal perception when I was living there, when we were living there, is even the blue collar, the guys on the factory line, they were still very much attached to that job. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a lot of the cultural way. I mean, you could even equate it to, the way our job culture was 40, 50 years ago, where, you went to college or whatever, right? That first job, you look to that first job of being where you're going to be, that company, the loyalty that you felt to that company for the rest of your working career. It was pretty rare that you left. And somewhere along the line, we had this shift. I'm not sure what the demographics or no, because it really started before your generation.
Yeah.
But it was, where it was, okay, well, I'm not really that happy there. Let me go see what this is like. or let me go see what this is like. I mean, because, I had a lot of peers that still, in an industry that I used to be in, where job hopping was normal. That was how, truthfully, that was how you got promoted. You'd work in job XYZ for Acme Brick Laying Company, and you do that for about 2 years, which is kind of the standard. And then you got another job offer, which was slightly more pay and slightly more responsibility. And people would do that primarily in large industrial areas like I saw it the most in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, where people would change jobs about, quite literally, you could almost set your calendar by it every 2 years. So,
I'm really wondering on this, because one of the things that I was thinking about a lot with this is like the you call it like social inertia of like wanting to like be where you are. And I wonder, and this is pure speculation, I haven't read anything on this, how much the technological changes of either just traveling, working from home, those different things have set that up. Because the inertia of changing a job, back in your day, that's a lot more than it is for me to change a job where I'm still going to be standing at this desk talking through the screen. Like the inertia of resisting your change isn't going to be near as strong. And I think that plays into it a lot of ways. I don't know, I want to throw it over to you though. What other factors do you think play into that sort of cultural shift?
you mean in the where it's more okay for people to change?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think it's, I don't think I could put a nail on it, but I would say that there's several factors, and I do think the remote work is part of it. But I also believe there's been a better transparency, whether intentional or not, that the employee understands more about what's going on up above them. And I would also venture to say there's probably a little bit more self-actualization, self-awareness of, my life does not have to be an unthoughtful or somebody who is not recognized. As just a friend of mine said this the other day, which I was like, dang, there's that word again, a fungible asset. And as when you're treated as a fungible asset in your organization, you have very little recognition for your personal contribution and personal value, which reflects back on how you feel about being there. If you're not getting recognition, if you're not feeling like, going back to, we've talked about this before, Maslow's hierarchy of needs and that need of significance, feeling like you're a contributor to an organization. If you don't have that feeling, then you have no attachment to it. If it doesn't matter whether you're white collar or blue collar, whether you're out digging a ditch with a shovel or you're the high paid PhD engineer designing the ditch, it doesn't matter. If you don't have that attachment, that feeling of significance and contribution, the payback, if you will, and I'm not talking about bank account, I'm talking about the mental aspect of it, then why stay around? Why there's no incentive to stay around other than the money that goes in your bank account, or maybe there's some special vesting thing in your 401k where, guess what, when I hit 100% vested in 3 years or 4 years, then I really have nothing to hold me here anymore, right? I mean, it's those sort of things that you got to be consciously aware of. So how do you find the right people is what I want to get back to. We spent a lot of time in the previous episode talking about the Great Resignation and how do you keep them, but it's really how do you find the right people, going back to the guy that I was talking about last night and shifting in from startup to real business. And if you do a good job of letting everybody know what's important to you as an organization, your core values, your mission, your vision, and that's understood and truthfully, part of your marketing campaign, if you will, then you will attract the right people. And your problem is going to be identifying the right people in the pool. What's that 10% of the people that truly fit in to that culture, vice they know how to answer the questions in the interview and they know how to massage their resume to get it through the filters. That's the thing. So how do you create that process? So it starts with having your company's core vision, your core values, mission and vision on display, shared out there to the public, because that's number one. And then number two, what's the process for finding the right people? What are your filters? How are you, what are the questions that you ask? Once somebody, you set up the filters, whether you're using an outsourced thing like Indeed or what is it, Monster Jobs and Clearance Jobs and all these other ones, or you're hiring, you hire a headhunter. It's a matter of how are you, when you get to that one-on-one interview, taking and making sure to the best that you can, creating that process to hire somebody. What questions do you ask? What processes do you put them through? Do you have an online test? Maybe if there's a certain skill set or some deep thought questions, or have them write an essay or whatever those things are. I've seen, one of our friends, Taki had a job posting out the other day that was like, oh, that sounds like fun, and it was not your typical, we do this, we need you to do this, you must have these skills. It was a narrative, which I was like, that's outside the box, and Taki's good at that sort of stuff. That's one thing I really like about Taki, is he always does things a little bit different. And he had a narrative describing the story of what that person needs to be and how that person fits into the larger story of Taki's business. And it was well done. And I saved a copy of it because I'm like, I don't think I could ever write that, but you know what? I could plagiarize Taki's stuff all day long, and I know he'd be okay. Because when you're just finish that thought up, if you think about the type of person you want, then your job posting, if you will, should attract that kind of person. So if you're looking for somebody with a creative mindset, then how about a creative job posting? If you're looking for somebody who is a black and white, coder, dun, 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 dun sort of thing, type in the code, then your job posting should match that. And how does that look to match them?
Yeah, I think you either accidentally or very, very wisely suggested this earlier. You talked about it, you referred to it as marketing. And that's really what it is it's you're applying the marketing approach to hiring. And one of the biggest things that you can do inside marketing is that kind of narrative story element, to where you're painting this picture, you're telling a story, and your prospective clients or customers are seeing themselves inside the story. I've talked about it like 3 or 4 times, the Ford truck ad with the dog building the house out in the forest. Like, I see myself in that story every single time I see it. It's like, I just want that truck so that I can go build a house in the forest with my dog, because I connect with the story aspect. And I think you can apply the same type of thing to the hiring process, just like you were saying Taki did. And it's about, I think, recognizing the different aspects of that situation that your prospective client would want to be a part of. Like you were saying, of the fun job versus the more black and white coding type job, and how Norman's going to think that's a shot at him. But
all right, Norman. Yes, we still need people like you to code things.
But in that aspect, it's like, well, what do you want to talk about that they would actually enjoy? If you're talking about somebody who's more in the black and white side of things, more analytical, then lots of big adjectives and fun words, they're going to check out. They're going to ignore them, or they're going to think you're lying to them.
They won't even get through the job description, right?
Exactly.
Like Taki's, I mean, that thing was probably a page and a half if I put it into a Word document. It was It was pretty long. And that person, that technical sort of, I want to follow a process person ain't going to read that.
Yeah. And then I think about like an alternative position, like more like the first one that came to mind was like a receptionist. And it's like something that's a little bit more like conversational. Then in your posting, you're going to need to be conversational. You're going to need to be like, just like you're talking to them. This should not be formal. That should not be a formal posting. That should be a, hey guys, we got an awesome environment over here. We're looking for somebody who's fun and likes to talk to people because we like to talk to people, and like boom, 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 and just build that all together to where it's like the person going who likes to talk to people because that's why they're looking for that kind of a job, and sees that and goes, oh gosh, well, I guess I could really fit in there. Whereas if you give them the more, the more analytical type post, long worded, very formal, they're going to tune out. It makes me think of years ago. I remember having a friend of mine review a business document I put together, and he came back and was like, well, technically you should rephrase. It was something about like formatting that, like, well, technically in the business world. And I was just like, what the hell are you talking about? I don't give a crap what the rule is. Like, it was font or something stupid like that. And I was like, I literally don't care. If somebody doesn't want to work for me because I don't use the proper spacing format that Fortune 500 companies do, then they're not a good fit for my company in the first place. Like, if that's something that you get held up on, then you're going to get held up on every little thing I'm doing. And that's not going to be very good for the company. And I remember with, if you're watching the video, as I was kind of smiling, shaking my head when you first started this, because I have been there in the startup case with Verby, when we were going through our hiring processes on it, I very intentionally left my my job descriptions pretty like vague, because I wanted it to be a personal ownership thing. I wanted somebody to read it, and then when I interviewed them, I would say, so what do you want to do with this position? Because I intentionally left blanks for them to fill in, so that it was event planning. That could be freaking anything. And then they go through and they're like, oh, well, I'm in a band and I think we should do virtual concerts. Like, cool. That was your immediate thought when you read through that job posting. And I left that gap for them to fill it in. So I think I know there's a little bit of a rant there, but it comes back to treating your hiring process like marketing. And in that same sense, it's the starting point for your marketing process is understanding who your target audience is, who your ideal client is. And it's the same thing for the hiring process. Who is the ideal person that you want to be hiring? And then write them that love letter and put it out there. And the 50 people who fit that will connect with it. And the millions of people who don't fit that won't connect with it. And kind of to your point of like going through the process of seeing if they're the right person. Just like marketing, if you do a good enough job in your messaging, then the wrong people will never even apply. And so that's kind of an important switch too. We were talking about this the other day with tribe and purpose marketing, it's like, you don't want to just attract every single person. A lot of people think of marketing, how did James put it, as being like the pretty girl at the dance. It's like, I want everybody to want to dance with me. Everybody should want to dance with me. But when you do that, you attract too many people, and then you have to sort through all of it, and you wind up wasting so much money because you get the wrong people all the time. So I'm going to flip the perspective on that, and I'm going to try to make it fit inside that analogy. You want to be the weirdo at the dance who has this very, very, very particular hobby. You're into Dungeons and Dragons, and you're the weird girl in the Dungeons and Dragons. And the weird guy who's in the Dungeons and Dragons, sorry, Dungeons and Dragons people, I'm friends with quite a few of them. They're a little weird. But the weird guy's going to come over to you because you're the weird one. they do admit it. They do admit it. But it's that same type of thing. Like, if you're like that, you want to be like that. It's like you talk about, you talk about dating, and it's like you want to be yourself, because if they don't like you, then you don't want to be in that position ever. So when you try to fake who you are, you're going to attract the wrong people. And that's very true, whether you're marketing, whether you're hiring, or whether you're at the high school dance, I guess.
Well, I think you touched on something that I thought was really interesting, because one of all the people I work with that are in transition, one of the things we talk about is resumes, and you're modifying your resume to fit that certain position, this, that, and the other sort of thing, along with the cover letter, blah, 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 all that standard process. But what we've never talked about, and I think back to all the times I was a hiring manager, And, I wrote the job description, and my job descriptions all look the same. I could probably pull them up, and no matter what type of job it was, whether it was a business development guy, a program manager guy, a site lead for someplace in equatorial Africa, a coder, they all look the same. And that right there, I think, is a huge lesson as a business, is to message it, going back to Takis, going back to some of the things you said with the, in the marketing aspect of it, is messaging, put your message together to match the person you want to attract. It's not, the bigs are out there, and I know, there's always an exception to a rule, but I can think of plenty of job descriptions I've read over the years, and they all look the same, no matter what type of job it is. And what that means is you get buckets of crap, and then if you're a big, then your HR recruiter has to filter through the buckets of crap, and you don't get the best person that way. Yeah, you can possibly get the best person, but man, if you take the same attitude, business leaders, if you take that same attitude that I've always taught and is out there in the world about your, modifying your resume to fit a job description. What if you took that same attitude before you posted that job description, and you put the care into that would attract and match the personality of the position that you're looking to hire? And how much easier and how much more likely you're going to get the right person. Might have to do a data study on that, because I guarantee you're going to increase your success rate by at least 50% by having a job description that is, the best word I can come up with is describes the personality of the position. Because one of the things, and I'll just digress and then throw it back over to you in a second. But one of the things that I've learned over the years, both personal experience and seeing it in others, is me personally, I can do any freaking job. I don't care whether it's flipping burgers, mopping floors, building a nuclear bomb. I can do any job. The Army taught me how to do that. I can figure it out.
I don't think you're supposed to talk about the nuclear bomb thing. Yeah, I think you signed something on that.
Yeah. But I can do that. I know I can do that. But am I going to be happy doing that? And that's the secret. That's the secret that we want, is we want that person. We want to find that person that has the skill set, has the right fit personally, and wants to do it. Isn't just needing a job. And when we as business leaders, business owners, hiring managers, put the time and effort into the right job description that we post out there, the job posting that we post out there, then guess what? We're going to attract the right people. You're 100% right. It is no different than a marketing campaign. I can't use the words that I'm going to use to get somebody in the hunting industry interested in what we do at Tribe and Purpose as I would for somebody who hires linguists. It's not going to work. They're two different ways, two different types of people, generally speaking. So start thinking about taking that little bit of extra time to put in and really create. Don't do the cookie cutter, download Google or go to Lockheed Martin and download, a job description off of Lockheed Martin or Booz Allen, because those are all going to look exactly the same. Create the narrative of the person that you want to hire, and then that's what your job description, that job posting should look like, because then you're going to attract them.
So we touched on it at the beginning of like the generational differences in this, and I want to paint this for people. So I think that there's this really we tend to look at our generation, and then it's like looking above and you're like, wow, look at those old crazy people, look at all the wild stuff they used to do. And you're looking down and you're like, wow, look at these young people, they don't understand anything. I'm doing it in my generation, looking up and down. I'm sure your generation, oh, I know your generation does it. Every generation does it. It's always a like, wow, we have this understanding, no one else does. And one of the things I wanted to paint on that, and it's a funny way of going through it, but I'm gonna get there. Is so things are always going to grow and change. And if you're a business leader, you need to be keeping that in mind during the hiring process, just like you would during any other process inside your business. And one of the things that makes me think of, it's a class that I took here at U of A, classic rock and American popular music. Right. And yeah, laugh all you want. It is one of the classes that I learned weirdly so much from. And one of the really interesting things is that you see this like 10-year cycle of rebellion. And it's basically the equivalent of, it's like, so you have R&B and you have country western, and then you had so rhythm and blues, and you had country western, and then people rebelled against that, made it into rock and roll, and people rebelled against that, and boom, 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 and you kind of go all the way down the line. And it's always just this rejection of the previous thing and trying to make yourself slightly different. I think my favorite example of it is punk, who rejects establishment, but then all the punk people got really big and sold out. So then you get grunge, which is a rejection of establishment again, except trying to reject it harder. Fun fact, one of the big things about grunge was most grunge bands don't have any solos, really, compared to others, because it's like, it's not about me, it's about the music. But the reason I go through that, as fun as it is there's this constant cycle of looking at what was wrong and rejecting it. There go to the philosophy side. You got modernism like 100 years ago, postmodernism of rejecting that, trying to move forward, and then postmodernism of rejecting the problems of postmodernism. And then you have what I would personally throw myself into, and I think most smart thinkers would probably put themselves into it, a meta-modernist, which is you're like, oh, wow, everyone got a little bit right. And so you're putting things together of like, wow, those things were good, but obviously those things are bad, times change, right? But the reason I'm kind of going through all of that is
wait, is the meta modernist in the metaverse?
No, I swear to God, I knew that term before metaverse and all of that started taking off the last couple of years. I swear. But the reason I bring that up through the rock and roll example and through the philosophy example is because things are going to continue to change. If you're looking to hire, like you said, a lot of my demographic is the ones in these looking for these jobs now. So if you're hiring a younger demographic, you need to understand what they're looking for. And the reason I brought this up, and the reason it made me think of it, was you were talking about the kind of generic templates for resumes and for job descriptions, and how it all kind of became the same thing. And then what happened is Google happened. And now I can go to any company that I want to apply to, and I can steal a resume from somebody who already applied there and put my stuff into it. So resume game is gone. It broke. Like, you know what I mean? And so these things are always going to change like that. And so it's really important to recognize those different aspects of change and embrace it in ways that you want. And what I mean by that is, just like how I said in my example of the business document that I shared with a friend that was criticizing my formatting because he took some class on how business is right or something. I don't know. But I looked at that and said, that's not the business I'm running. I don't care. And you can do the same type of thing with all of these different aspects. It doesn't have to be the perfect resume for somebody to get in the door. But if you write your job description the way we were talking about with the messaging aspects, then you're going to attract the right people. And whether the resume is pretty or not doesn't actually matter, because resume building isn't the job. Like, you know what I mean? And so it's really just goes back to understanding who you're working with, who you're trying to hire on, what demographics you're looking like for that, your target audience, if you will. And then understanding what do you like really want out of it as a business, and what do you really want to know? Like, you can ask really creative thinking questions, like going back to our example of like the analytics, black and white coding, like that type of very type work. Okay, you put a crazy creative thinking question in there. What good does that do for your job? Like, does that actually qualify this person for it? Or do they just need to be able to do this the fastest as anyone else? Again, sorry, Norman, but it's recognizing what you really want out of it, and then building your hiring process around what you really want. And when you set it up that way, you'll attract the right people and you won't attract the wrong people, and things will come together in a much better way.
Good points. Good points, man. And you know what? Since there's not a guest, I'm going to let you go first on what did you learn? Just
and
throw you off.
Well, I feel silly saying this because I think I said this, but it's not a thought I had before the show, so it still counts. Just the importance of messaging in the hiring process. I think that a lot of businesses, and I probably did this with Verbi, even though I found a positive example of what I did. I'm sure there was a million negative examples, but that how important it is to get the messaging right and not treating yourself as like going back to the analogy earlier, the pretty girl at the dance. It's like, you don't want everyone to come here. You don't want to be the person everyone loves, because then with that, it's superficial. And you don't want people coming just because you're the hottest business in town. And also, you're not the hottest business in town. I don't know who all has listened to this, but I could, pull out my wallet, put it down right now. You're probably not the hottest business in town. And so don't message in your hiring process like you are, because you're not. And just switch that, attract the weirdos that you want to fit in with your weirdo environment. How about you, Dad?
Yeah, that's great. And, mine's kind of a derivative of that. And I just, it is, you have to treat your hiring process, your search process, just like you do finding your customers, your clients. What's their demographic? Where do they hang out? What messaging do they resonate with? And how does your message resonate with them, and matching those two? It's a little bit overused, and it doesn't really, the more I think about this phrase doesn't work all the time, but it's an interesting phrase to think about. You can't say the wrong thing to the right person. You can't say the right thing to the wrong person. Now in the job market, it's a little bit different. So you've got to get in front of the right person and attract them in, and show them that, hey, what we do, we think you would find very interesting. And if you didn't know it, it is kind of an employee market right now, because every business owner I know is struggling to hire quality people. Mm-hmm. So that means that the quality people have the upper edge. Think of it like a housing market, right? It's a seller's market, it's a buyer's market. Well, right now it's pretty much an employee's market. So make sure that you're getting the right match, because you're wasting money if you're not.
Mm-hmm. So one thing, sorry, I want to add on one thing. I just, looking down at my notes, I realized I didn't fully finish part of the thought on the change of philosophy. One of the reasons that I thought of that was that when we talk about like changing jobs and like the ability to do that, I think that it's that same like rejecting of the previous generation, that it was like these people who grew up, and for me, it wouldn't be my generation, it'd be the older generations, seeing people work that 50-year career for General Motors, and then seeing how unfulfilled they are. And then so it's like, it's rejecting that. But then, kind of going into the meta-modernist side of it, they haven't gotten to the point where it's like, okay, well, how do I get fulfillment? It's just rejecting, it's not building yet. But it's that same type of thing where you're going to see that philosophical change where it's like, okay, I see that I don't want that. And then now, going back to a lesson to move forward with, you as the person doing the hiring need to figure out what it is they do want and provide that path to fulfillment that still checks all those boxes. So sorry, just had to get that in there.
Oh, no, that's perfect. That's perfect. Good way to wrap it up and summarize it for us. So why don't you run us out?
All right. Thank you all for listening to today's show. Special thanks to our sponsor, Tribe and Purpose. Find your tribe, find your purpose. You can check out recent episodes of the Cam Otis Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And check out a full archive at thecamandotisshow.buzzsprout.com. The Cam Otis Show is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks again. We'll see you all next week.